Welcome to this webinar of the ICA, the International Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design Association. The ICA is a professional, non-profit global organization for all things related to CPTED, and this webinar is one of many programs run by the ICA for preventing crime and creating safer spaces and places. My name is Tinus Kruger, and I'm the Executive Director of the ICA. Just want to highlight a few administrative issues before we start. Please make sure your microphones and cameras are not activated during the course of this webinar. You are welcome to introduce yourselves in the chat if you want to. We will deactivate the chat during the presentations though, but we will make it live again after the presentations and the discussions. We would like you to make use of the Q&A function though, because that's where you can post questions and comments while people are talking. We will deal with all questions and comments after the three presentations. And then just so you know, we will be recording this session and it will be available later, and we will send the link to that. We invite you to take advantage of the many programs that we offer as ICA. You can use the link provided on the screen and contact us if you have any questions. We will make these links available during the course of the webinar in the chat where you can see them as well. Just to remind you and make you aware of this disclaimer that the views expressed in this presentation are those of the guests and does not necessarily reflect the position of the ICA. The ICA does not assume legal responsibility for the speaker's statements, the intellectual property, or the information presented today. Okay, let's begin this webinar. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you, our delegates or attendees, as well as our panelists, Juma Asiago from the United Nations Habitat in Kenya, Dr. Enrique Oviedo from the ECLAC Commission in Chile, Dr. Tim Pascoe, an ICA Director from the United Kingdom, and our moderator, Dr. Manjari Kanakapoor, an ICA Director from India. I will now hand over to Manjari to start the discussions.
Namaste, everybody from India. I am Dr. Manjari Kanakapoor. I am a director at the ICA, and I will be your moderator for this session. And we'll try to make it as engaging as possible. As you can see, our panel is resplendent with some of the luminaries in this field. And we welcome all our viewers from across the globe, even those who are not attending right now, but will be looking at the recordings because of the time across the globe, the time zones. And I welcome you all to this discussion on CPTED and the UNSDGs. We are all aware today about the relevance of the subject, but before we plunge into the session, I will just give you an overview of the next 90 minutes. We will have presentations from each of our esteemed panelists, followed by a panel discussion around the questions, some of which we have received from some of our registrants, and also live questions as you start pouring them into our Q&A box. I will request all of you to kindly post all the questions in the Q&A box as you want them to be posed to the panelists. And if you have a specific panelist you have the question for, then please mention that and your name, of course. There is a possibility that due to paucity of time or other such things, we may not be able to handle some of the questions or address all the questions you pose. We will be happy to engage with you after the webinar by mail or whatever mode is convenient, and we will also request our panelists in such a case to engage further. So now let me give you a brief introduction. This particular webinar is extremely close to my heart, and I feel extremely involved in it. And the reason being that the UNSDGs, which is we know stands for UN Sustainable Development Goals, are something which is, at least I can talk in India, they are defining almost everything, every public policy. Even I was in academics, and everything needs to be, kind of relatable to the UN SDGs and the goal of achieving them by 2030. Of course, we have the author of that, Mr. Asyogo, with us today. And so when I, and also to share with the audience that I have just published a book on the subject of security by design, and therein I have made this, kind of parallel of how close the UN SDG goals and the CPTED vision or mission and the kind of methodologies are, is an extremely potent place, not just for CPTED, but for UN SDGs and for the benefit of all humanity. So without further ado, let's, kind of plunge into this discussion right away. I will introduce to you our first panelist for the day. I will introduce each panelist as they come up before their presentation. And we are much, much privileged and honored today to have amongst with us Mr. Juma Asiago himself. Juma is an urbanist coming from Nairobi, Kenya, and a social scientist and a graduate in sustainable urban development at the University of Oxford. He currently is the coordinator of the Global Safer Cities program at UN Habitat. With his 20 or more years of experience working in program development with national and local governments and in the development and implementation of municipal-wide crime prevention and urban safety strategies in Africa, Latin America, Caribbean, Asia Pacific, and Eastern Europe. He has developed a vast network of implementing partners under the Global Network of Safer Cities, and a significant achievement of his work has been the adoption, as we are all discussing today, by the member states of UN, the system-wide guidelines on safer cities and human settlements in 2019, which is validating the working approach practiced at the city level. So we welcome Juma to the panel, and I will hand over to him to start presenting and sharing his thoughts on the subject.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Manjari Kapoor. I hope we can all see the PowerPoint. Yes, indeed. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, as is mentioned by Dr. Kapoor, provides a global plan of action, which calls for the end of poverty, the protection of the planet, and also is geared towards ensuring that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. It is considered as a path-breaking and comprehensive plan of action in its approach to sustainability, incorporating inclusion, equitability, security into the folds of development. Now, for UN Habitat, as the agency or as the focal agency of the United Nations responsible for urban development and sustainability today, localizing the SDGs and creating local action coalitions involved in the promotion and advocacy of those SDGs worldwide is of critical importance. For us, the action framework for sustainable development is further elaborated by the new urban agenda, which again is a global plan of action specifically tailored towards cities and urban development, and that was formulated in Quito, Ecuador in 2016. UN Habitat's entry point to CPTED is through the Safer Cities programming, which is understood as a cross-cutting theme of its sustainable urban development agenda, and one that provides a holistic view of crime and insecurity that is grounded in prevention rather than repressive ways, and that looks at safety as an issue of better urban management and urban governance. We have understood that crime prevention strategies, in order for them to make significant inroads into the social cohesion of the city, the understanding of insecurity must encompass the root causes of criminality as well as insecurity. There's no better way to understand the Safer Cities approach than looking at the critical mass of evidence that has been generated over the last 25 or so years and 10 years of the global network on safer cities that demonstrate what works and what doesn't work at the municipal level on the prevention of crime and violence. That looks at the local governance of safety frameworks that have been created, and largely the focus on the principle of the co-production of safety and security for all. There is mass evidence today that has been generated at the local government level that can actually be evaluated and understood in terms of the impact of safety and security in this lens that is away from policing and the criminal justice system. This methodology, as Dr. Kapoor mentioned, is now elaborated in the UN system-wide guidelines on safer cities and human settlements, which provides an evidence to action framing, and that cities are encouraged to annually look at or review their safety priorities based on the strategies they have developed. We have also integrated now the way these diagnostic tools around the evidence of safety allow for citizens to participate using technology. And one of the demonstrated tools that now are being looked at worldwide in terms of safety audits is the safety pin, which was actually founded or developed in India. This speaks a lot to some of the attributes that CPTED calls for, and I think is one of the areas we want to look at as we look into the way CPTED is integrated into the Sustainable Development Agenda. The process-oriented approach also of safety integrates CPTED as one of the pillars, others being the social prevention measures and the law enforcement measures. For UN Habitat, it is important to understand CPTED in an integrated perspective, one that looks at a way of equipping municipalities with CPTED tools amongst the other pillar tools to create municipal safety programs, and that are developed in partnership with the civil society actors. And that look at also aspects of human rights and the right to the city, and how citizens benefit or access the benefits of city life and enjoy the urban advantage. This perspective, safety is understood as a prerequisite to sustainable development. Without safety, there can be no sustainable urban development, and without sustainable urban development, there can be no safety. No better way to understand the significance of this than the current developments in Ecuador, where the president has declared the state of emergency on the internal armed conflict involving gang violence in neighborhoods, and which in this past week has dramatically exploded and captured by the president as a problem for the whole world. We have seen days of unrest that has involved 2 gang leaders escaping from jail, prison guards held hostage, and explosive devices set off in public spaces in a number of cities across the country. This, of course, has pointed to the need to solving the crime and violence problem from the roots. And the roots of the problem in the cities and neighborhoods is in the cities and neighborhoods, which, as I mentioned, demonstrate the significance of safety as a prerequisite for sustainable urban development. Now, when we talk about this, it's important for CPTED to be understood from a no one size fit all approach. And this is largely in view of the fact that we're talking about cities and towns, which are over the past, when we look at the 21st century model, we see different ways that cities have visualized themselves across the world based on their aspirations and visions. There are those cities, largely in the global north, that have looked at financial aspirations and captured the way we look at a half-full approach, the wealth creation in the city. While those cities that constantly are looking at the problematics, particularly where you talk about poverty, and are constantly really dealing with the slums and with ways of how to eradicate poverty. So the difference between wealth creation and poverty reduction is basically the lens in which we look at at life and at the city. And the outcomes are demonstrated in the way we see cities. We see those cities that look like squatter settlements. Many of these are seen in Latin America, Africa, and Asia Pacific. We see those cities that have taken the form of the garden city model. We've seen those cities that have understood themselves as the egalitarian cities. We've seen those that have taken the persuasions of entrepreneurship, those that, like in the Middle East, that are designed with oil in mind, those that are Disneyfied, and those that are looking suburban in approach, those that are taking the refugee issues and are evolving as camp cities, and of course those that are inspired by aspirations like CPTED, the eye on the street cities. In whichever way we look at this, what is important as a common ground is that we now can understand the city as one that is made of people, stones, and rules. And that allows us to then make interventions that can change the trajectories of this city. Here is where the Sustainable Development Goals come in. And here is where now we look at over 60% of the SDGs are actually urban or spatially related. And that provides a basis upon which CPTED can actually look at all those indicators within this particular frame, and particularly looking at Goal 11, which it talks about making cities and human settlements safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable, and that are linked to the Goal 5 and Goal 16. Of course, not considering the Goal 17 for partnerships for development. In Goal 11, I would like to particularly point to the indicator that talks about providing universal access to safe, inclusive, and green public spaces, particularly for women, older persons, and persons with disabilities. This really speaks to also what the New Urban Agenda file elaborates as looking at cities as spaces for living, work, and play. I think it's important for us to see what the urban monitoring framework, which has been designed to implement the localization of the SDGs, really has presented in terms of its indicator framework on safety as one of the key pillars of defining the urban way of looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. Habitat has defined two particular instruments in how the Sustainable Development Goals are localized in countries. One is via the national urban policies, and two is via the city development and growth strategies. When we talk about integrating CPTED into broader urban strategies, we talk about how cities now look at larger policies such as walkability policies, nighttime policies, and the question we have to address here is how CPTED is positioning itself in this way at a neighborhood scale. With, of course, looking at the vulnerabilities of crime, looking at what is a normal city, a normal neighborhood in terms of its crime trajectories, what is a vulnerable neighborhood in terms of crime trajectories, and what can be seen as a critical neighborhood where criminal governance is set in all cases, a different approach to how CPTED can actually be integrated. Public space is at the core of all this, and the way we understand public space in terms of its availability, use, and access is key to the sustainability question. We say that a city that has around 40% of its landmass dedicated to public space promotes safety as a public good. So when you begin to see cities going as low as 10% of their surface area dedicated to public spaces and seemingly moving towards the privatization of safety, then those are unsustainable models. Those cities that look at safety in terms of segregated models like gated neighborhoods, those are unsustainable models. We need to understand what is it that would make cities understand safety as a public good and bring down the walls in the face of crime and violence, and look at cities planning for social integration and inclusion. Some of the ways we think about is the change of relationships between institutions of law enforcement with the populations. The case of Rio de Janeiro with the police youth project, where the police were trained using hip hop, graffiti, changed the relationship in public spaces. And that changed the way safety was actually profiled in the neighborhood, away from looking at changing youth as a problem. We look at Colombia and look at the Ciclovia model, in which multi-purpose ways of or time-based street management of streets has actually changed the way Bogota residents experience safety in the central business district. That also is a way in which we could actually integrate the concept, integrate it in broad ways. In Cape Town, we see the social urbanism model, which was, of course, designed in Medellin through the violence prevention through urban upgrading approach. Again, another way of taking the co-production of safety and security to the level of sustainability. Today, the city can now actually be understood as a laboratory of safety practices, which brings all these different actors together, those of you who are in the audience, under the framework of local government, and one which can consolidate knowledge, facilitate learning, draw the innovations, which are many, and move towards integrated solutions that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is calling. Here are some of my proposals in terms of how UN Habitat can collaborate with ICA going forward. We could take a way of developing this year a report on CPTED and SDG monitoring and have this presented at the World Urban Forum that's coming up in November. We can also be able to identify some of your beacon cities that have applied CPTED approaches at community levels through the 3 generational models and facilitate a laboratory exercise with the local governments. And finally, we can also be able to develop a global CPTED and SDGs report that captures some of the case studies, for example, a peer review process of some of the cities you have. In the month of October, we have what we call the Urban October. We can demonstrate some of those promising case studies over the 30 days of October, 31 days of October. And of course, as I said, finally, we could have sessions at the World Urban Forum in Cairo that can demonstrate how CPTED is aspiring to improve itself and promote itself as a driver for the Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you all.
Thank you, Juma. That was really, really crisp, and really appreciate you have covered almost all the things that we had lined up for the day. And that's great. That's a very comprehensive presentation. And I loved the parallels because that's exactly what my starting point was. For example, the Goal 3 of the UN SDGs, which talks about good health and well-being. You can't have well-being without being secure. And things like equitability in Goal 5, and economic growth and decent living, which doesn't come without the basic ingredient of security in any community, any society. And then, of course, your emphasis on sustainability is something that is what CPTED is kind of hinging on, especially the 2nd and 3rd generation CPTEDs, which is really talking about the sustainable aspects, sustainable security and sustainability aspects of in a comprehensive manner, not limited to the environment only. So thank you so much, Juma. And we will go into the next presentation, and we'll come back to you with a lot of questions which have already started pouring in. And that's a very good sign. And I welcome Enrique, our second equally eminent panelist for the day. Enrique Oviedo, Dr. Enrique Oviedo is a doctorate in social sciences from the Radboud University, Netherlands. And he has been in charge of preliminary studies and design execution of the security and participation plan of the city of Kalama. And he highlighted a program of the recovery and animation of public spaces. He was also part of the Citizen Expert Forum convened by the Ministry of Interior of Chile. In 2003, he began his work in the public sector and he has served as a coordinator of technical cooperation of the Inter-American Development Bank and for the support for the preparation of Chile and Seguro program. He coordinated the drafting of National Citizen Security Policy and also organized and held the position of Head of Intersectoral Planning and Coordination Unit of the Public Security Division of the Ministry of the Interior of Chile. So we welcome you, Dr. Enrique, and we request you to please share your presentation.
Dr. Manjari Kapoor, Dr. Tim Pascal and Juma, colleagues, friends, on behalf of ECLAC, I thank you for the invitation to this webinar. I will speak slowly so that it does not become more difficult for you to understand me. My English is very close to my Spanish. I would like to talk about the country from Latin America and the Caribbean. Members of the Economic Commission for Latin America, based in Santiago, Chile, which is one of the 5 regional commissions of the United Nations. ECLAC, founded in 1948, contributes to the economic and social development of Latin America and the Caribbean, coordinates action for its promotion, and extending the economic and social relations of the countries among themselves and with the other nations of the world. In 2015, the international community reached a set of historical agreements that sought to respond to the urgency and severity of the challenges it faces in terms of stability, peace, and development. This agreement gave life to the 2030 Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and the new Urban Agenda, among others. To monitor and review the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, there is a regional mechanism called the Forum of the Countries of Latin America and the Caribbean on Sustainable Development. For ECLAC, protection against violence, crime, and fear is an important condition for the economic and social development of our region. According to the United Nations guideline for crime prevention, although states play a primary role, security, crime prevention are not the exclusive responsibility of the government or public law enforcement bodies. The region is in a major crisis with strong social and productive impacts that will last in the medium term. In the so-called lost decade of the 80s, the recovery of poverty levels took 25 years and coincided with the re-establishment of democratic regimes after military dictatorships. It has brought citizens and international support, in addition to a context of a global optimism after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Today, it is different because we live a series of cascading crises: high citizen discontent, warring distance from representative democracies, lack of trust toward all state institutions, including police, justice, and prison system. According to 2020 data, in Latin America, there is a low trust in state institutions. On average, only 36% trust the police and 32% trust the president. 31% trust electoral institutions, 27% in the government, 25% in the judiciary, 20% in parliament, and less to 10% in political parties. The population of Latin America and the Caribbean is growing and represents about 9% of the world's population. However, Latin America and the Caribbean have a third of the world's homicides. Latin America and the Caribbean is a highly urbanized region. In 2020, it is estimated that 80% of its population lives in urban areas. In 2030, it will be a region with more than 80% urban population. The problems of the city and in the city, such as violence, crimes, and fear, will grow. According to the information available in 2023, in the region, the trend of SDG 16 indicator data is moving away from the goal, or if they show a correct path, progress is too slow to reach the goal in 2030. Latin America and the Caribbean has an average rate of 320 robberies per 100,000 inhabitants, while in Europe it is 14 and in Asia 11. The region has an average rate of 1,000 serious assault per 100,000 inhabitants, while Europe is 74 and Asia 24. Homicide is a serious problem in the region. Latin America and the Caribbean has a higher average rate than North America, Asia, and Europe. In 2021, 8 of the 10 countries with the highest homicide rates in the world were in Latin America and the Caribbean. Asia, Europe, and Oceania are below 3 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants. North America, around 6, Africa, 12, while Latin America and the Caribbean, 20 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants. But is security in the world and the region a competition or partnerships? Just a piece of information. The civil-private security sector in the world has been growing at a rate of 7% annually. In 2014, in Latin America, at the total number of private security personnel, 20% were unlicensed guards. Security is for everyone or no one. You cannot give security to only some people without removing security from all people. In the region, we have problems in public security governance, deficit in the management of public security policies, process of transforming public policy objectives into results, distance between what was proposed and what was achieved, evaluate what has been done. In Latin America, there is an excessive confidence in the social effect of macroeconomic performance. The weakness of institution market failures in crimes are underestimated. If young people join the informal drug market, it is very difficult for them to live there for a good job other in the market. It is difficult for them to accept. It is difficult for organized crime to let them accept the offer. Having solution to city crime in an urban region is a public priority. Maintaining or recovering urban space is a multi-actor task and includes the street, the squares, social relations, the political capacity to dream and make agreements. The state, countries, governments is responsible for the socioeconomic organization of the public and private space of the cities. The state must regulate and guide the rules on the management of environmental variables to reduce violence, crimes, and fear. But to have friendly and safe city, a cultural change is required, a public-private community commitment. I have known the CPTED methodology for many years. Likewise, I know the community and work of CPTED. I know the work through different specialists. CPTED is a support for the achievement of peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. Peace and security is also a contribution to other SDGs, such as SDG 1 and poverty, SDG 3, good health and well-being, SDG 5, gender equality, and SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, among others. In their approach, first, second, and third generation, they provide solutions for the prevention of crimes and the strengthening of community ties. In the region, it is necessary to bring the virtue of the state, the community, to the people. Increasing collective trust can help reduce fear and increase the risk and effort for crime. The world and Latin America and the Caribbean since 2015 with the 2030 agenda, the new urban agenda, the Paris Agreement, among others, have been guided by a development model that seeks technological adaptation, inclusivity, decrease in inequality, reduction or elimination of carbon dioxide, peaceful, safe. The change in the region in the field of public security must lead to reduce the high rate of homicides and crimes, organized crime, and the availability and use of firearms in crimes, as well as reduce the economic cost of crime. Increase confidence in institutions that must act responsibly and effectively at all levels and provide justice for all. For ECLAC, it is interesting to learn more about the solution offered by CPTED. At ECLAC, within the framework of the monitoring SDG agenda, we have two spaces to analyze and to discuss about the SDG 16. One of is the meeting of Forum of the Countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and the other one is the Regional Conference on South-South Cooperation in Latin America and the Caribbean. Maybe we can talk about that when finish our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. Again, a very, very well-informed, should I say, presentation. And I'll quickly jump on to our last panelist for the day so that we can then enter into a good interactive session with the audience and us. So over to our own director from United Kingdom, my good friend, Dr. Tim Pascoe.
Oh, thank you, Manjari. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully it will come up. Okay, well, as good morning from the UK. As Dr. Manjari said, my name's Dr. Tim Pascoe. I am a director of the ICA for a number of years now. I'm also director of the Institute of Community Safety. And I'm going to give you a very short presentation, and I'll hopefully speed it up a lot so we have plenty of time for questions. And in my presentation, I want to really get over perhaps some key messages. The first one is that CPTED has been engaged with sustainability for many years, and it's almost, I would say, part of CPTED DNA. Even definitions of what CPTED is about include sustainability. I want to then perhaps go on to some of the differences between UN SDGs and CPTED approaches and how we're now merging and meeting in the middle. I'll talk about how CPTED has evolved to become involved further in sustainability. Like our other speakers, I'll look at some touch points of SDGs and CPTED. And I'm giving you a very personal view from a SCPTED kind of academic practitioner point of view. And I'll be using some of our members' work here, so I'm sure some of them are in the audience. And if I got the interpretation wrong, please please use the chat to further inform us. So I'm going to kick off about sustainability and crime. And when we're talking about sustainability and crime, certainly from my kind of view, it's economic growth, kind of social well-being and environmental protection. And it's balancing all those three in an equitable manner. So sustainable development, the importance is very clear. The focus has been in vulnerable areas, particularly, for example, the Southern Hemisphere, but it's important in all developing countries everywhere that we get it right. The two important elements for me is equitable and a balance. So if I was giving you my view from the UK, we're a very popular country. We're a very small set of islands. We haven't got much room, but we still need more homes for our growing population. But we want to impact that growth on our environment. So we want to get a balance there, and we don't want to ensure that if we're looking too much on the green agenda, it doesn't prevent a step back for our crime prevention and designing out crime. Sustainability at CPTED is getting that balance right, that balance of economic impacts, social engagement, environmental protection, and CPTED is all about the environment. So environmental, economic, and social, all of which CPTED impacts upon. So I'm going to argue it's not a new idea that all these three factors have been taken into account. If we look, we can see I've just pulled out a few ideas which have linked CPTED, sustainability in the public health agenda, back to the first decade of this century and the previous century. So we've been dealing with public health and sustainability. We've been dealing with economic elements of sustainability, carbon costs and CPTED back in 2011. Even more recently, one of my colleagues, I think he's in the audience, Richard Stones from the UK, has been making the business case for using CPTED. So we've covered all those economic elements and health elements for a number of years. We've also covered the social elements, the social tools and social engagement. Our president, Macarena Raw, was using tools like the Cloud of Dreams here since 2005 in Chile, where they engage young people and children to get their views on their environment using pictures and that type of thing. So we've been using social engagement tools for a number of years. So it's not a new thing, sustainability in CPTED for us. Indeed, just down to what we believe CPTED is and our definitions. Well, one of the early leaders of CPTED, a guy called who's led, and I've just forgotten his name, it'll come back to me, but Paul Cousins, a UK academic that now operates out of Australia, has used the original definition and changed it to give an up-to-date definition of what a lot of us in the CPTED world believe reflects what we do. And at its core, as you can see, is sustainability. A process for analysing and assessing crime risks in order to guide, manage the built environment to reduce crime, public health, sustainability, and quality of life. So this is Paul's version of Tim Crow's original definition, and I think it's ideal and really illustrates that we are CPTED and sustainability go hand in hand. So moving on, we set that, there's heritage there. What are the differences between SDGs and CPTED? I would argue that traditionally SDG and UN work from the top down with kind of overarching policy goals and aims, whereas CPTED traditionally has worked from the bottom up with practical solutions, community consultation, out there on the ground, working literally up from the ground. So we're dealing with very practical tools. The context, again, is extremely important in CPTED practitioners, the ICA, and the context will be different each time. Whereas the policy can be very broad. Can they mix? Well, criminology research and Blaustein here, for example, when actually looking at the original SDGs and looking to see how criminologists might impact on it, clearly shows that CPTED practitioners can influence local policies and practice. So there is a clear link, and I'm suggesting that we're coming together. And I'll suggest other ways as we come along. So how did we get here? Crime prevention through environmental design. Most of us are very well aware of it. If you're new to CPTED and just come in on this particular seminar, we have a number of generations of CPTED of how we've developed. And here is one of those descriptions of how we come here. This is Dr. Terence Love. I know he's in the audience as well, so I'm sure he'll correct me if I've got any of it wrong. I'm going to use a couple of his literal slides, a blatant copy. So Dr. Love would say there's those three phases: first, second, third generation, and he also adds fourth of digital. The first is when we've been looking at the physical environment, building roads, parks. The second is then when we're involving the community and support the social realm, engaging with the people. And the third is when we're broadening it out, actually looking at health, sustainability, and economics. And you can see all of those three levels directly relate to the SDGs and sustainability. Looking at another summary of that process, again from Dr. Raw, our current president. First generation CPTED is about reducing opportunity for crime. If you reduce the opportunity for crime, you build on the community's confidence, you get far more economic stability, and you get a growth in economics. Second generation, about citizens' participation. If you engage the citizens, you get their confidence, then you get confidence in the community. And the third generation is all about that public health, that sustainability, livabilities in towns and communities. If we're making them more livable, then we're hitting sustainability. Again, we can see those clear links. Now back to Dr. Love's work, which really gives a very good summary for myself of where third generation CPTED now engages with our CPTED world. So third generation CPTED is almost when we're engaging at a city level, whereas first generation, you might say, was in individual buildings at a neighborhood level. And Dr. Love actually makes a point that third generation emerged following a United Nations paper about sustainability. So there is that very clear link, that very clear relationship. And he makes the point that it includes all of the things of sustainability. That's economics, that's social well-being, economic growth, environmental protection. All of that's included, and he actually identifies what those relationships are. And I'll read them here. The effects of health issues, economic issues, environmental sustainability issues result in pressures to commit crime. The benefits of crime exceed the costs, and effects of crime result in comprising health, economy, environmental sustainability. And third generation uses the same relationship to try and to reduce that crime. So if we cut down drug use, then we improve people's health. Very simple example there. So thank you, Terence. I'm sure you're going to put something in the chat later about how other key messages of that work come out. So looking more at third generation, because that is where I feel our SDGs at UN and CPTED are really coming together in the middle. Third generation has been well investigated by another two of our colleagues within the ICA, founder member Greg Seville and Matea, who are both, Matea is a fellow director of the ICA. They've been particularly upfront now in developing third generation CPTED, and they make the point again that it's architecture, engineering, urban planning, which is first generation, engaging the community is second generation, and third generation is actually delivering some of those SDGs in a livability level for cities and neighborhoods. And just to illustrate that, and like Juma and Enrique, we're going to link some of the SDGs directly. So these are the touch points, and they went through them, but we can look at each of one of these and we can clearly see that they are directly related to those SDGs and what CPTED delivers. So CPTED reduces crime tendencies in a neighborhood, which encourages more economic investment into the local area, which leads to economic growth and more work opportunities. Good health and well-being, again, if we create an environment that people actually want to live in, not just reside in, live, work, enjoy, have pleasure, you'll increase their physical and mental health. So that's the broader levels. At the very specific levels, we had the drug taking example that we just used before. Reduce that drug taking, increase that health. All of it is linked. Other ones, obviously, sustainable cities and communities. Juma made that point very well, and that's what Safer Cities has all been about. Climate action. I mentioned some of the work earlier that was done that showed that if you implement some CPTED practices, you actually directly lead to reduced carbon costs. So again, there's a green element there. There is a climate action there. Perhaps one of the most obvious ones is number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So by directly addressing neighborhood issues, city crime issues, actually putting CPTED into practice, you get social justice, a sense of peace. You get confidence in the community. You reduce crime, reduce fear of crime. You get people proud of their neighborhoods and leading to inclusivity. So we can see all of these have been directly linked. I'm just going to touch on some of the UN initiatives that CPTED have used. I'll be very quick on this. I don't want to take any of Juma's thunder, and he covered them fairly clearly. I just want to show that already we've been working with Juma and some of his colleagues here in the UN with SDGs in a broader sense. And hopefully we can do a lot more of that. So the clearly one, and Juma here, he actually runs this. What is the Safer Cities program? It is, the aim is to provide livable cities and improve residents' quality of life. and it's underpinned by urban governance, planning, management, and the use of good knowledge tools like CPTED. As Juma said, it focuses on vulnerable populations at all levels. And most importantly for us, they adopt a CPTED approach. So effective management of public urban spaces, communal activities. So it's reflecting what there is a CPTED approach. And we all know we've got very clear CPTED approaches. We know context is everything. We know that we even have ISO's international standards on CPTED now. So it'd be interesting when we talk to Juma if those type of things are involved. But as we can see, clearly CPTED is not only on the agenda, it's actually being put into use by the UN. Other areas, the global network on safer cities, again set up, something we would like to even further engage with. And again, that's involving crime prevention strategies. We believe we're a global network, so we would like to see that link. And I'll go on very briefly to show those who aren't part of the ICA how our global network is beginning to frame itself. And the last example that we've picked up is the network of institutes. So the UN's Crime Prevention, Crime Justice Network. They have a network of institutes who are meant to assist the international community. They're meant to encourage and collaborate with governments. They should be linking in with us and practicing that CPTED. I'm sure in some areas they are, in some areas we could do even better. But again, linking in with what's existing. Just a final point. I think it's blatantly obvious now, and I don't want to go on, but economic sustainability relates directly to CPTED. CPTED encourages local investment, local employability. Environmental sustainability, greening neighborhoods, reducing carbon costs, making business cases, which encourage further green environmental work, leads to environmental sustainability. Health sustainability and social sustainability, again, clear goals. A clear element of second generation CPTED has been, and it's at the very core, is the engagement of the community, ensuring we get the community trust, get their views, get their confidence, which leads directly to social inclusion. So we can see across all these SDGs and the policy aims of the UN, we are substantially helping with CPTED. Just a bit more about the ICA and our global network. Dr. Raw started what we call the Umbrella Initiative back in 2017, which is supporting individuals, ICA chapters across the world. It's been successfully expanding. And as you can see from our ICA structure, it's across Africa, Asia, Australasia, right across the world. So we've got a very clear global network here, and we would very much like to further integrate and link that to your own existing networks, Juma. So if you're listening, that's like one of the things we'd like to chat about. So concluding, you'll be pleased to know, this is my firm belief, we align with several, if not most, of the UN SDGs. We focus on enhancing safety, reducing crime, but our principles contribute to all of those broader social, economic, environmental objectives directly. If we integrate our principles into urban planning, community development, safety initiatives, again, we contribute to the multiple SDGs. So again, we're doing it. It's already there. Let's do it even better. So where do we go next? Well, I'm extremely pleased to hear Juma's suggestions of the a global CPTED SDG report and maybe being present, having an input into all the forums he suggested, the Urban Forum in Cairo. All of this is great and music to my ears and the ICA's ears. And probably really covers what I've been talking about already. But I'd like to see perhaps a more formal link between UN and ICA, better exchanging what we know, sharing about best practice, consolidating, all of these type of things, linking our networks to yours, so better globalization, obviously recognizing context. And I would like to hopefully CPTED and ICA might be a key core in the next SDG main conference in the next 3 or 4 years, I think. So that's really enough from me, because I can see Manjari's going to get cross with me if I don't stop. So a big thank you, and look forward to some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And yes, we have eaten a bit into the interaction time, but what the points you were making, Tim, were really pertinent and very, very important, I think, in the outcome of this webinar. Thank you so much. I'll quickly, right away, plunge into the question and answer session. So there is a question. I am not able to pronounce this name, but it is for Juma. Juma, can we have you, please? Okay. So, all right. So the question is, first and foremost, what is the UN doing to promote the use of the CPTED methodology by municipal governments? And there is a related question which is very similar to this very question. So I'll club that in, and it says, how does the UN see sharing CPTED practice at the local level? How is it working? So there are 2 parts to the question.
Yes. Okay. So my answer will be brief. Of course, by saying that safety is now understood as a cross-cutting theme of sustainable urban development, is to the extent that the UN promotes methodologies like CPTED by municipal governments at that scale. And so it is no longer just seen as a criminal justice and police alone approach, but it is now integrated as a key dimension of how cities plan, manage, and govern themselves, and how they deliver the systems of planning, management, and governance at the level of land, housing, infrastructure, and basic services. So CPTED comes along with that. And then secondly, in terms of sharing, the UN is developing what we call the Urban Safety Monitor, which is also about how we help cities to better document their work and encourage them to use models that work and dispose models that do not work. So the emphasis on documentation is very key now, and we have a global peer review process that is ongoing at this stage.
Thank you so much, Juma, for that crisp answer. I'll take the next question to Dr. Enrique. Dr. Enrique, there is a question that, again, kind of a club of 2 questions, but I think I'll take to you the broader one first. How do you see the ICA and the UN working together moving forward?
Thank you. First, for the CLAC, CPTED is a new methodology. It is because we really don't work in this kind of subject. But I think it's possible to work together. ECLAC in April, within the framework of the Regional Forum for Monitoring the 2030 Agenda, we will have a side event on SDG 16, where CPTED can be invited. The forum reports its progress to the high-level political forum of the United Nations that meets in New York. It is a possibility to talk about the over agenda and the CPTED agenda. And also, I listened Dr. Tim Pascoe. He said CPTED aligned several SDGs. And also, he said and highlight one of the difference between SDG and CPTED works. SDG works top down and CPTED works bottom up. And I think for more practical work is also possible within the framework of our intergovernmental meeting on South-South cooperation, work together. The countries of the region could decide to have projects between 2 or more countries, and the next meeting of the regional conference on South-South cooperation is in May. I will send you the links about this meeting and page. I think the field is open to think and work together.
Thank you, Dr. Enrique. I hope that answers the query. Dr. Tim, there is a question for you too in the question box. In your opinion, what is the relevance of the CPTED impact evaluation tool developed together with the Bio University for the evidence-based approach alliance among UN and ICA?
Okay, well, the CPTED evaluation tool has 2 elements really. One, related to evidence. One is that it's been tested and proven, so it is based on an evidence-based approach. The second one is an actual process that you go through to ensure you're collecting data to ensure that your CPTED suggestions, recommendations is built again on good analysis and data. And the process also enables you to tailor it to your own local context so that it's not a off-the-shelf solution. It is actually tailored to that area and the people. So it's a very useful tool, and we would like to see maybe if it's not already being used, whether it could be used as one of the examples of best practice with the UN. So Juma, it's a tool we'd like to perhaps discuss with you. And if you're looking for some other best practice examples, that'd be one of those.
Thanks, Tim. So my next question is to Juma. Juma, the question is, okay, this is a question I'm going to ask probably both of the panelists from outside ICA. How can ICA be better positioned in the international debates convened by the UN?
Yes. One, I think I'll take what Dr. Pascoe mentioned. We will have to strengthen the collaboration between the UN and ICA. Perhaps after this, we could probably get into a sort of like letter of collaboration, highlighting a roadmap of aspects that you think the UN can help build the capacities around sharing CPTED as a best practice within the broader sustainable urban development conversation. And then secondly is to look at the global events that the UN has that brings all the different actors together, and how CPTED ICA can actually become a key player in terms of networking events at the World Urban Forum stage every 2 years, the next one in Cairo in November. I think these are two clear pointers that we could take as at the onset.
Excellent. I think you've given the ICA membership and the directors a good reason to cheer and look forward to these. The same question I'll take to Dr. Enrique. Dr. Enrique, how can ICA be better positioned in the international debates convened by the UN and all the bodies that you are at the helm? You're mute, sir.
Sorry, I have problem with the sound. Can you
repeat the question? Okay.
Yes.
So how can ICA be better positioned in the international debates convened by the UN and other international organizations?
Well, I don't know if I can respond that question really.
Okay. All right. That's fine, sir.
Yeah.
That's fine. Fair enough. No problem. Okay. So my next question I'll take to Tim. Tim, as we all saw, Juma has talked about the ways and means in which ICA, he looks at a prospective relationship and a role for ICA. And I would like you to respond on that and how ICA, how geared up and how equipped ICA is in partnering in all the kind of areas that Juma has proposed.
Okay, I think it's a formal link would be very good, as Juma suggested, that we could actually develop a roadmap map together. That would be ideal. We have our own international network, and we could do a cross-reference to Juma's institutes that are already on the list and look at particular areas where the ICA is active and where we think are particular vulnerable areas, and then we can highlight different scenarios, so Latin America scenario and Asian Indian scenarios, and link those together. And once they're there, we can develop those case studies, and we can also develop a material for conferences and so forth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. So I'll take, Dr. Enrique, I'll take the next question to you. This question is, as mentioned many times by Dr. Tim Pascoe, by a friend of ours from Australia, Dr. Terence Love, and the author of all that discussion is himself writing to you. He wants to know, he's interested in your thoughts on the last 13 years of work in favelas in Rio, reported on Rio on Watch, and whether they should be used more widely or whether there are better approaches. Your thoughts, sir?
I think that the trust is a big problem in Latin America and the Caribbean, and also in our favelas. We have different name for the same situation, poor neighborhood. People trust less the state. They have less opportunity to know the virtue of the state, police, justice. They don't access justice and police, and also to the some public policy. The statistic about that is really it showed that this problem is a big problem in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we have to change this situation. And I think the CPTED methodology in the third generation took this kind of problem and close solution, but the trust. We have to change the situation, but it's a really hard, because this is a structural problem.
Thank you so much, Dr. Enrique. Juma, I'll club quite a couple of questions together. They, I think, are answering, probably roving around the same subject. Juma, the next question is for you. What is the UN doing to promote the use of CPTED methodology by municipal governments? I know of your peer review program, which is something that I'm following already. But I'd like to club with that and club another two questions that we've received along with that for, countries like India or other countries in the global south, where probably CPTED is not really much known, and maybe experience and the importance of CPTED is not that well documented, and maybe where there is a lot of red tape, and municipalities not have their own kind of restrictions. What can the UN or the UN Habitat in particular do to ease or influence national policies, or kind of impose, or rather should I say promote, the concepts of CPTED or the ICA?
Okay, first and foremost, we need to acknowledge that we have already made important strides in 2019 by having member states adopt UN system-wide guidelines on safer cities and human settlements, which means that for the first time, the concepts of prevention that the municipal governments promote are understood by national government as a key contributor to the prevention of crime. And CPTED is one of those approaches that are constituting what we call the UN guidelines on safer cities. So let's also acknowledge that already what that means when governments adopt such kind of guidelines is that when we talk about national budgets, it should translate at some point where national governments also provide resources to municipal governments to promote concepts like CPTED. The thing that I think we need to emphasize more and more is what we call the stakeholder mapping analysis. Today, we have a lot of fragmentation in countries around who does what, to an extent that some even are overlapping mandates. When we talk about the incidences of crime and violence, we focus this mandate largely on institutions of policing and criminal justice, and that's what constitutions of countries do give. We need to understand what is the complementary role of local governments in aiding such a whole of government, whole of society approach. And that's what we should be looking at more and more, is not to replace what the police and the criminal justice system is doing, but to make them do their work better by having complementary approaches. That is exactly what we need to do. Yeah.
So I'll just add to that. I mean, I've been struggling with these issues in India. We've been talking and we've been exchanging mails on that, you and me, Juma. But for example, I take the example of India, and I'm sure there are many others in the global south where security is not under the municipalities, for example. It is probably a state subject, or maybe sometimes even the federal subject. Like, for example, it is in India. Now, the difference comes in that maybe CPTED and environmental concepts of design and security are probably controlled by a controlling municipality or a municipal organization. versus security falling not under their realm. So these overlaps and these multi-dimensional subjects like sustainability and security are sometimes a little different, and maybe there is an advocacy and an educational aspect of the comprehensiveness of these that needs to be brought across to the less educated or maybe the uninitiated in the subject. So, I mean, I can talk for example, our context, but I'm pretty sure there are many others, probably in Africa and Asia also, and I'm sure Latin America too at some level.
Yes, as I said in my previous comment, we have to do what we call consideration of mandates as given by the local context. If in the Constitution of India, security is a mandate of the police and criminal justice system, rightfully so it is. What is it that local governments have as a mandate that contributes or complements that? It's within the areas of urban planning, urban management, and urban governance. So we are supposed to work with those authorities in urban planning, urban management, and governance to ensure that safety in the context of urban planning is understood for what it is. It means we're not trying to get a mandate in local government for security, and that's what we often do wrong. Then we can't budgets then, because local government does not get that institutional mandate. So it's a question of how we capture CPTED and other ideas around safety in prevention areas in language that is understood by local government. In Colombia, for example, safety has translated into what now they call social urbanism. That's what Medellin came up with. And so in that sense, it is funding at the local government level to promote concepts like CPTED in that way. So we need to model the language we use in terms of what we mean in terms of our principles of CPTED to the context that local government can promote, but not try to see to it that we enter into the conflict of how to take security mandates away from national government and give them to local government.
Correct. Very well said. Thank you so much, Uma. That was very well answered, and that was a question that was close to me. And so I think I'll take one last question to Dr. Enrique, and I think we will be out of time by then. Dr. Enrique, one last question to you from our President, Dr. Macarena Rao. She is asking, in your opinion, what are the benefits of an UN ICA alliance for spreading CPTED in the Latin America region for reducing the high incidence rates of crime?
Thank you. First, I have to say that for me, CPTED is a well-known way of working. I have been working for, I don't know, 20 years, possible, with Macarena Rao, who has taught me a lot about this methodology. I think in Latin America, and a way to link with the last question, we need a territorial solution about prevention of crime, prevention of crime, and I think it's very important to link the solution bottom up and top down. And I think CPTED has theory, but also has practice. And for Latin America and the Caribbean, I think the more important thing is the practice. We need some public program who teach us a type of possibility to improve over situation and decrease the violence, the crime, and the fear. And I think the link in between CPTED and the United Nations agenda is a good it's good for everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Enrique, for that answer. And I think we are at the absolute end of our time now. And on behalf of the ICA, I heartily thank all our honorable panelists, their extensive knowledge, your experience, all the great knowledge and viewpoints, perspectives that you have shared with us today. I'm sure that our viewers would have really gained and benefited from that knowledge. I definitely have. I'd also like to thank all our viewers from across the world. And we hope that you found today's webinar insightful, and we look forward to you joining us again for our future webinars, as always. So I will now go to, I think we will be ready to close this session. Tunis, over to you.
Unmute myself. Thank you very much. And thanks again also from my side to all the contributions, not only from the panelists, but also from the people in the audience, so to speak. So as you can see, hopefully on the screen, there will be a survey available for you. You can scan the QR code. I'm going to leave it there for a second or two. Please scan it. The address is also in the chat. I hope that it's visible to everyone in the chat. There's also some other details and information in the chat that you can use. For instance, if you are not a member, please become one. See the address where you can reach us on your screen. For more information about our individual certification for CPTED professionals program, please also go to this address at the website. If you would like to have more information about our course accreditation program for CPTED course developers, please go to the CAP website. Should you need more information, you can find us on social media. And with that, we will close with a last video and hope to see you soon again at our next webinar.